The sting of my stitches was nothing compared to the empty bed at 3 in the morning. Jasper vanished mid-labor for a fishing trip to save his company. Or so I believed, until his mistress posted a photo of them toasting champagne on a yacht. He thinks I am just a helpless orphan to discard, unaware that the city's most powerful tycoon is standing in the shadows, wiping my tears. My godfather is very angry. My name is Betty Larkins, and for the last 6 hours, I had been reduced to nothing more than a vessel of contracting muscle and screaming nerves. The fluorescent lights of the delivery room at St. Mary's Hope hammered against my retinas, bright and unforgiving, exposing every bead of sweat that rolled down my temples. I gripped the cold metal railing of the hospital bed so hard my knuckles turned the color of old bone. Another wave seized me, a crushing pressure that started in my lower back and wrapped around my abdomen like a vice made of hot iron. I let out a low, guttural sound, not quite a scream, but a primitive acknowledgement of pain that felt too large for my body to contain. Beside me, Jasper Thorne did not flinch. He did not reach out to wipe the damp hair from my forehead. He did not whisper words of encouragement or tell me I was doing well. Instead, he sighed, a sharp, irritated exhale through his nose, and checked his wrist. It was a reflex I had seen a dozen times in the last hour. He pulled his phone from the inner pocket of his charcoal suit jacket, the screen illuminating his face with a ghostly blue light. He was tapping away, his thumbs moving with a frantic energy that had nothing to do with the arrival of his firstborn child. "Jasper," I managed to choke out as the contraction finally began to recede, leaving me gasping for air like a fish thrown onto a dock. "Please, the water. I need ice chips." He looked up, but his eyes were glazed over, looking through me rather than at me. "What? Oh, right." He grabbed the plastic cup from the tray table and thrust it toward me without looking, his attention already magnetized back to the device in his hand. "Is it the office?" I asked, my voice trembling. I tried to be an understanding wife. I knew the company was struggling. Thorne Enterprises had been bleeding money for 3 quarters, and Jasper had been carrying the weight of his family's legacy like a cross. I had spent nights going over the books with him, or at least the books he allowed me to see, trying to find solutions. "It is a disaster. Betty, that is what it is," Jasper snapped, finally pocketing the phone. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting the gel. "I have a situation, a massive situation. We are having a baby." "Jasper," I whispered, feeling a fresh wave of panic that had nothing to do with labor. "That is the situation. Don't be reductive," he said, pacing the small length of the room. His Italian leather shoes clicked sharply against the linoleum. "I have a client, a VIP, the kind of client who can write a check that clears our debt by tomorrow morning. He is in town for 12 hours. He wants to meet." "Now?" I asked, disbelief warring with the pain rising again in my belly. "It is the middle of the night. Who does business now?" "He wants to go fishing," Jasper said. The words hung in the sterile air, absurd and cruel. "Fishing," I repeated. I felt like I was hallucinating. "You want to leave me here, dilated to 7 centimeters, to go fishing?" Jasper stopped pacing and turned to me. His face was hard, stripped of the charm he had used to woo me 3 years ago. "It is not just fishing, Betty. It is networking. It is survival. This man loves the night bite. He has a yacht docked at the marina. If I get on that boat, I close the deal. If I stay here and hold your hand while you do something that women have been doing in caves for 1,000,000 years, we lose everything. Do you want to bring our daughter home on a foreclosure notice?" The contraction hit me then, harder than before. I cried out, reaching for him blindly. "No, Jasper. Please. You promised. You promised you would be here. I am scared. Something feels wrong. Please do not go." He looked at my hand reaching for his sleeve as if it were a claw. He took a half step back, just out of my reach. The rejection was visceral, a physical blow that landed square in the center of my chest. "Stop being so emotional," he hissed, glancing at the door to ensure the nurses hadn't heard. You are being incredibly selfish. Betty, I am doing this for us. For her. He gestured vaguely at my stomach. I have to provide. That is my job. Your job is to push. So do your job. And let me do mine. Jasper? No, I screamed, the dignity I had tried to maintain shattering completely. Do not leave me alone. I have no one else. You know I have no one else. That was the knife, and he twisted it. He knew my history. He knew I was the orphan girl, the one who grew up in the system, the one who had spent her life looking for a family. He knew that being alone in this room was my greatest terror. I will be back before she is born, he lied. I could see the lie in the set of his jaw. It is just a few hours. Pull yourself together. Betty, you look hysterical. He checked his watch one last time. I have to go. The tide waits for no man. Right? He forced a tight, grim smile that didn't reach his eyes. I love you. Do this for the family. And then he turned his back. I watched the broad shoulders of his suit jacket retreat. He opened the door, and the sounds of the hospital corridor rushed in beeping machines, squeaking cartwheels, distant chatter. Then the door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Minutes later, a team of nurses bustled in. They checked the monitors, their faces professional and mask-like. All right, Betty, the head nurse, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Margaret, said, You are fully dilated. It is time to move. Where is the husband? He was just here. He had to leave, I whispered, the shame burning my cheeks. Work emergency. Margaret exchanged a look with the younger nurse. It was a look of pity, fleeting but unmistakable. Right. Well, we are going to get you through this. Honey, let's get you to deliver. The next 2 hours were a blur of agony and exhaustion. I was wheeled into the delivery room, a space that felt vast and cold. Without Jasper's hand to anchor me, I felt like I was drifting in a stormy sea. I squeezed the bed sheets until my fingers went numb. Push, Betty Big, push, the doctor commanded from the foot of the bed. I pushed until black spots danced in my vision. I pushed until I thought my ribs would snap. And in the quiet spaces between the chaos, I listened. I listened for the sound of the door opening. I listened to Jasper's voice saying he had made it, that he had caught the fish and saved the company and came back to me. But the door never opened. I can't, I sobbed at one point, my head lolling back against the sweat-soaked pillow. I can't do it alone. You are not alone, Margaret said fiercely, gripping my shoulder. We are right here. You are strong. You are a mother. Now bring her into the world. I summoned a strength I didn't know I possessed, a strength born of pure desperation. With one final, earth-shattering scream, I felt the pressure release. A moment later, a high, thin wail pierced the air. She is here, the doctor announced, her voice softening. It is a girl, Betty, a beautiful, healthy girl. They placed her on my chest. She was slippery and warm, a tiny squirming weight that suddenly made the entire world narrow down to a single point. I looked at her scrunched-up face, her dark hair matted against her skull, her tiny fists flailing against the air. She was perfect. Hello, I whispered, my voice raspy and broken. Hello, my love. It is just us. It is just you and me. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the sweat. They were tears of relief. Yes, but also of a profound, hollow sadness. This was the moment we were supposed to share. This was the moment Jasper had talked about when we painted the nursery yellow. Our family, he had said, but the room was empty of family. It was just me, the orphan, and my daughter, who already had a father who chose a business deal over her first breath. After they cleaned us up and moved me to the recovery room, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep ache. The clock on the wall read 3:15 in the morning. My phone was dead. The battery had drained hours ago while I was timing contractions. I looked around the dimly lit room. My daughter was sleeping in the bassinet next to the bed, a small bundle wrapped in a generic hospital blanket. The silence was oppressive. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to believe that he had a good reason, that the car had broken down, that he was running through the hospital lobby right now. "Nurse," I called out softly. A young nurse, different from the ones before, poked her head in. "Yes, Mrs. Thorne. Do you need pain medication?" "No," I said. "I mean, yes, but can I borrow your phone? Mine died, and I need to call my husband. He does not know she is born yet." The nurse's expression softened. "Of course, honey." She pulled a smartphone from her pocket and unlocked it, handing it to me. "Take your time." My fingers shook as I dialed Jasper's number. I knew it by heart. I pressed the call button and held the device to my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs. Ring, ring, ring. "Come on, Jasper," I whispered. "Pick up." "The subscriber you are trying to reach is currently unavailable." I hung up and dialed again. Voicemail. I dialed a third time. Voicemail. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach, colder than the ice chips I had begged for earlier. He wasn't answering. Was he still in the meeting on the boat? Just as I was about to hand the phone back to the nurse, the screen lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from a social media app, Instagram. The nurse must have had it running in the background. I froze. The notification wasn't for me, obviously, but the name that flashed across the top of the screen caught my eye. It was a suggested post, trending locally. The algorithm knew my location, knew the circles I moved in. Serena Vance just posted a photo. My breath hitched. Serena Vance, the daughter of Jasper's biggest competitor, the woman who had been a thorn in my side for years, the one who always lingered a little too long at galas, who touched Jasper's arm a little too familiarly. Jasper had sworn up and down that she meant nothing, that she was just an annoying business rival he had to tolerate. My thumb hovered over the notification. I shouldn't look. It was the nurse's phone. It was an invasion of privacy, but a sickening instinct. A primal warning bell. Screamed at me to open it. I tapped the screen. The image is loaded. High resolution and brutal in its clarity. It was a selfie taken on the deck of a yacht. The background was the pitch-black ocean, illuminated by the soft, golden glow of deck lights. In the foreground, two people were pressed together, their faces flushed with alcohol and laughter. One was Serena, looking glamorous in a silk slip dress that left little to the imagination. Her head thrown back in a laugh, a crystal flute of champagne in her hand, and with his arm wrapped tight around her waist, his face buried in the crook of her neck. Was Jasper? He wasn't fishing. There were no fishing rods. There were no clients. There was just a bucket of expensive champagne, a platter of oysters, and my husband, the father of the child sleeping 3 feet away from me. I looked at the timestamp. Posted 2 minutes ago. I looked at the caption. Fishing for trouble with my favorite catch. Sorry, not sorry. #midnight romance. #upgrade. #yacht life. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and landed on the sheets. The world didn't spin. It stopped. It stopped completely. The pain of the stitches, the exhaustion of the birth, the fear of the future, it all vanished, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade slicing through my soul. He hadn't left to save the company. He hadn't left for a client. He had left me, screaming in agony, to go party with the one woman he swore I never had to worry about. I looked at the photo again, burning the image into my brain. I looked at Jasper's hand on her waist. I looked at the smile on his face, a smile of freedom, of relief. He was celebrating. He was celebrating while I was bleeding. I turned my head slowly to look at my daughter. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her father was a monster, unaware that her mother was currently shattering into a million jagged pieces. "Mrs. Thorne," the nurse asked gently, stepping closer, "is everything okay? Did you get a hold of him?" I stared at the wall, my eyes dry and burning. The tears were gone. I had cried enough tears for Jasper Thorne to fill that ocean he was sailing on. "No," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic, and terrifyingly calm. "He is busy. He is fishing." I handed the phone back to her. As she took it, I saw my reflection on the dark screen. I looked wrecked, pale, hair matted, eyes sunken. I looked like a victim. I looked like Betty the orphan, the girl who could be tossed aside. But as I lay back against the pillows, listening to the soft breathing of my daughter, something inside me shifted. The grief was there, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it, something else was kindling. A spark, a tiny, dangerous ember of rage. He thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He thought he could abandon me in the dark and I would just fade away. I closed my eyes, and the image of the yacht burned behind my eyelids. Let him drink his champagne. Let him laugh with Serena. Let him think he had won. Because he didn't know about the man in the shadows. He didn't know about the Godfather. And he certainly didn't know that Betty Larkins just died in this bed. And the woman who was waking up in her place was someone he should be very, very afraid of. The screen of the nurse's phone had gone dark minutes ago. But the image of Jasper and Serena entangled on that yacht was seared into my retinas like a brand. I lay in the hospital bed, the silence of the room amplified by the soft, rhythmic beeping of the monitors, and I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. It was as if the woman I had been yesterday, the weeping, desperate wife begging for her husband's hand, had died on that delivery table, and someone else had woken up in her skin. Someone colder, someone sharper. "Fishing," I whispered the word into the darkness, tasting the bile that rose with it. How could I have been so catastrophically naive, in the circle of elites that Jasper so desperately tried to emulate? Fishing was never about bait and tackle. It was a crude, insider euphemism. It meant trawling for pleasure. It meant hooking up with something illicit away from the prying eyes of the city, usually out on the open water where moral codes dissolved in the salt air. Jasper had not gone to catch a client. He had gone to catch a thrill. And I had been the perfect, gullible anchor keeping him steady while he cast his line elsewhere. The realization unlocked a cascade of memories. A mental file cabinet flying open and spilling its contents onto the floor of my mind. The signs had been there all along, glaringly bright. But I had squeezed my eyes shut, terrified of the dark. I remembered the scent I had smelled on his collar 3 months ago, a heavy, musky jasmine that was definitely not my floral mist. He had blamed it on a hug from an overzealous elderly aunt at a charity mixer. I remembered the withdrawals from our joint savings account, labeled simply as consulting fees, sums of $2,000 or $5,000 that vanished into the ether, and I remembered the way his mother, Elena, had looked at me during Thanksgiving dinner, a smirk playing on her lips as Jasper texted under the table. She knew. They all knew. I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't even realized was being told. The hours ticked by, agonizingly slow. I did not sleep. I watched the sun bleed through the blinds, turning the gray room a sickly yellow. I fed my daughter when the nurses brought her to me, my movements mechanical. I looked at her innocent, sleeping face and felt a fierce, terrifying protection surge through my veins. She had my nose, but she had Jasper's chin. I traced that tiny chin with my finger and silently vowed that she would never inherit his spine. It was nearly 9 in the morning when the door finally creaked open. Jasper walked in. The performance began the moment he crossed the threshold. He was still wearing the same charcoal suit from yesterday, but it was rumpled now. The tie loosened, the top button undone. He carried a bouquet of carnations that looked like they had been purchased from a hospital vending machine 5 minutes ago. Their petals were already browning at the edges. "Betty," he breathed out, rushing to the bedside with a theatrical stumble. "Oh God, Betty, I am so sorry." He leaned in to kiss my forehead, and I had to use every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. The smell hit me instantly. It was a thick, cloying cloud of peppermint mouthwash, trying and failing to mask the sour. pungent stench of stale gin and expensive cigars. It was the smell of a hangover, not a business meeting. "Did you catch him?" I asked, my voice weak and raspy. I kept my eyes wide, forcing a look of hopeful concern. Jasper shook his head, looking tragically at the floor. "No, the deal fell through. He was unreasonable. I spent all night on that boat trying to convince him. Betty," I begged him. "I told him my wife was in labor, that I needed to be here, but he wouldn't let me leave until we went over every single clause." He looked up at me, his eyes rimmed with red, likely from lack of sleep and alcohol. Not tears. "I failed. I missed the birth of our child. And I didn't even save the company. I am the worst husband in the world." He buried his face in the mattress near my hip, his shoulders shaking with what I assumed was supposed to be a sob. It was a masterful act. If I hadn't seen the photo, if I hadn't seen the timestamps, I would have been comforting him right now. I would have been stroking his hair, telling him it was okay, that he tried his best, but I had seen the photo. My hand hovered over his head. For a split second, I wanted to grab a handful of his hair and smash his face into the metal bed rail. I wanted to scream that I knew he was drinking champagne while I was bleeding. I wanted to show him the screenshot I had forwarded to my secret email account. "Don't draw your sword until the enemy reveals all his flaws." The voice of Arthur Sterling echoed in my mind, cool and commanding. My godfather had taught me that when I was just a girl, sitting in his mahogany library while he played chess. Emotion is a liability. Betty, information is ammunition. Gather it all before you fire a single shot. I slowly lowered my hand and patted Jasper's shoulder. "It is okay, Jasper," I whispered, injecting a tremor into my voice. "You tried. That is what matters. We are just happy you are here now." Jasper lifted his head, relief washing over his features. He believed it. He believed I was still the stupid, orphaned Betty who worshipped the ground he walked on. "You are an angel," he said, kissing my hand. "A saint. I don't deserve you." "Do you want to hold her?" I asked, gesturing to the bassinet. He glanced at the baby, and for a fleeting second, his expression went blank. There was no wonder, no love, just a calculation. "Of course," he said, putting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked her up awkwardly, holding her like she was a fragile, expensive vase he was afraid of breaking. Rather than a human being, "She is small. She is perfect," I corrected him. "Right, perfect," he echoed. He held her for less than 30 seconds before placing her back in the bassinet. "I need to use the restroom. The coffee from the marina is running right through me." He placed his phone on the bedside table face up and hurried into the ensuite bathroom. The door clicked shut, and the sound of the lock turning was the starter pistol. I sat up, ignoring the sharp pull of my stitches. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I reached out and snatched the phone. The screen was locked. Of course. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I stared at the keypad. Panic rising. What would a narcissist use? I typed in 0000. Incorrect. Then I remembered. The day he took over as CEO of his father's company. June 15th, 0615. The phone unlocked. My fingers flew across the screen. I didn't have time to look at everything. I went straight to the messages. The most recent thread was pinned to the top. The contact name was listed simply as Consultant. I opened it. Consultant Serena. "Has the cow popped the burden?" "Yet. I am waiting at the hotel. You forgot your watch on the boat. Jasper." "Just walked in. She bought the story. Playing the grieving husband now. Give me an hour. Consultant Serena. Make it quick. I spoke to Daddy. He says if we merge the companies by the end of the quarter, he will cover your debt. But you need that trust fund money to pay off the immediate loans. Are you sure the kid qualifies, Jasper? I checked the bylaws of the family trust. As soon as there is a legitimate heir, the fund releases $2 million for child maintenance. I just need to secure full custody. I will claim she is mentally unstable, postpartum depression, Being an orphan with no support system makes her a high risk. The courts will eat it up. Consultant Serena genius. Get the cash, dump the nurse, and let's get married. I look terrible in black. So let's make it a summer wedding. I stopped breathing. The air in the room seemed to vanish. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was a conspiracy. Jasper didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to destroy me. He planned to paint me as crazy, strip me of my child, steal the trust fund money meant for her upbringing, and use it to finance his new life with Serena. He called our daughter a burden. He called me a cow. I heard the toilet flush. I quickly closed the app, wiped the screen on the bedsheet to remove my fingerprints, and placed the phone back on the table exactly as it had been. When Jasper emerged, drying his hands on his pants, I was lying back against the pillows. My eyes closed. "Betty," he asked. I opened my eyes slowly. "I am just tired. Jasper, so tired." "Rest, darling," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I will handle everything." Before I could respond, the door swung open again. This time, there was no hesitation. A woman swept into the room, bringing with her a cloud of heavy, expensive perfume and an aura of supreme judgment. Elena Thorne, my mother-in-law. She was dressed as if she were attending a funeral for a rival she despised. Impeccable black silk, pearls the size of grapes, and a hat that cast a shadow over her severe, surgically tightened face. She did not look at me. She did not look at Jasper. She walked straight to the bassinet and peered inside, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she smelled something unpleasant. "Well," Elena said, her voice like grinding glass. "It is certainly red." "Hello, Mother," Jasper said, straightening up like a scolded schoolboy. "Meet your granddaughter." Elena pulled a pair of gold-rimmed glasses from her purse and inspected the baby closer. She did not reach out to touch her. She did not smile. She examined my daughter with the same critical eye she used to inspect the seams of her upholstery. "She has the Thorne forehead, I suppose," Elena conceded, turning away from the bassinet as if bored. She finally looked at me, her gaze raking over my sweat-dampened hair and pale hospital gown. "But the rest of her is very ordinary, unremarkable." She offered a tight, pitying smile. "She looks just like you, Betty. What a shame for the poor thing." The insult landed with the precision of a sniper shot. It was meant to make me feel small, to remind me of my place as the breeding stock that had diluted their precious bloodline. "I think she is beautiful," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. Elena laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Every mother thinks her crow is a swan. Dear. Now, Jasper, have you spoken to the lawyers? The trust paperwork needs to be filed immediately if we want the disbursement by the 1st of the month." "Mother," Jasper warned, glancing nervously at me. "Not now. Betty needs to rest." "Oh, please." Elena waved a hand dismissively. "She just had a baby. She didn't lose her hearing. We have business to discuss. Betty understands business. Don't you? Oh, wait. No, you don't. You were a nurse. Bedpans and bandages." She turned her back on me, effectively dismissing my existence. "Come outside. Jasper, I need to explain how we are going to handle the christening." Serena suggested a lovely caterer. Jasper looked at me, gave a helpless shrug that said, "What can I do?" "She is my mother," and followed her out into the hallway. I was alone again. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the bassinet, where my unremarkable daughter slept. They thought they had won. They thought I was the weak link, the disposable incubator who would sign whatever papers they put in front of me just to keep the peace. They thought they could take my child, take the money, and leave me in the gutter where they believed I belonged. I slowly sat up, the pain in my body retreating behind a wall of ice-cold determination. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. If I left now, if I simply divorced him, they would drag me through the mud. They had the money, the lawyers, the connections. They would paint me as incompetent, unstable, poor. They would take her. But they had made a fatal error. They assumed the game was played on a board they could see. I reached for the hidden pocket of my hospital bag. Pulling out the small, velvet pouch I had kept hidden there for years, a gift from a man who had told me to open it only when the sky was falling. Inside was a black card with no numbers, just a silver chip and a signature embossed in gold, sterling. I held the card in my hand, feeling its weight. Jasper wanted a war. He wanted to talk about family legacy and power. I picked up the nurse's phone, which she had left behind on the counter, and dialed a number I had memorized but never called. It rang once. "Sterling Residence," a deep voice answered. "It is Betty," I said, my voice hard as a diamond. "Tell my godfather I am ready to draw the sword." The door to my hospital room had barely clicked shut behind the retreating backs of Jasper and his mother when the atmosphere in the corridor underwent a sudden, palpable shift. The ambient noise of the maternity ward, the squeak of rubber soles, the distant wail of infants, the chatter of nurses was abruptly severed, as if someone had thrown a heavy switch through the small rectangular window in the door. I saw the nurses at the station stand up straighter, their faces draining of color. Two men in impeccably tailored black suits moved into view, their backs to my room, effectively sealing off the hallway. They were not hospital security. They stood with the disciplined stillness of apex predators guarding a kill. I knew who they were. I knew who was coming. I pulled the thin hospital sheet up to my chin, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a long-buried past catching up to the present. The door handle turned. It was a slow, deliberate movement. Arthur Sterling did not just enter a room. He annexed it. He stepped across the threshold, and the sterile, fluorescent-lit space suddenly felt too small to contain him. He was a man of 70, but he carried himself with the vitality of a man half his age. His silver hair was swept back, severe and elegant. He wore a three-piece suit of midnight blue wool that likely cost more than Jasper's entire annual salary. And in his hand, he held a silver-handled cane that he used not for support, but for emphasis. He stopped at the foot of my bed, his steel-gray eyes that could send stock markets tumbling with a single glare, softened as they landed on me. Then they drifted to the plastic bassinet where my daughter slept, and I saw a flash of profound, aching sadness cross his face. "Elizabeth," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. He was the only person in the world who called me by my full name. "Uncle Arthur," I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue after so many years of silence. He walked to the side of the bed, his movements fluid and quiet. He took a handkerchief from his breast pocket, pure white silk with his initials embroidered in navy thread, and gently dabbed a tear from my cheek that I hadn't even realized had fallen. "Look at where your stubbornness has brought you, my dear," he said, not unkindly, but with a heavy weight of regret. "You wanted to be Betty Larkins. You wanted a simple life, the white picket fence, the husband who loved you for you, not for the Sterling connection." He looked around the cramped, generic room, his gaze lingering on the wilting carnations Jasper had bought from the vending machine. "Is this the simplicity you fought me for?" I couldn't look him in the eye. Shame burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. I had spent the last 5 years running from Arthur's world, from the shadow of the Godfather who had promised my dying father he would protect me. I had wanted to prove I could make it on my own, that I didn't need the Sterling Empire to find happiness. "I was wrong," I choked out. The admission shattered the last of my pride. "I was so wrong. I thought I found love. I thought I found a family." "You found a nest of vipers," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "Vipers who mistake their venom for power." I reached for the phone on the bedside table. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was solidifying. I unlocked the screen and brought up the screenshot of the text messages between Jasper and Serena, along with the photo of them on the yacht. I turned the phone toward him. "Look," I said. "Look at what he did while I was giving birth to his child." Arthur took the phone. He adjusted his glasses and stared at the screen. His expression did not change. He did not gasp. He did not frown. He simply went still, a terrifying, absolute stillness that was far more dangerous than any outburst of rage. He swiped through the images, reading the texts where Jasper called me a burden, where they plotted to steal my child and my sanity. After a long minute, he placed the phone gently back on the table. When he looked at me, his eyes were cold enough to freeze the blood in my veins. "They are not just unfaithful, Elizabeth," Arthur said quietly. "They are insolvent." I blinked, confused. "What?" "The Thorne family," Arthur explained, clasping his hands over the handle of his cane. "They are living on vapors. I have had a file on Jasper Thorne since the day you brought him home to meet me 3 years ago. I knew he was weak, I knew he was hungry, but I respected your wishes. You told me to stay out of it. You told me you wanted to trust him. So I watched from a distance. I watched as he leveraged the family company to the hilt. I watched as he mortgaged his parents' home 3 times. I watched as he borrowed money from loan sharks in the meatpacking district to pay for that Italian sports car he drives." My jaw dropped. "He told me the company was just going through a rough patch. He said they had assets." "They have nothing," Arthur said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Smoke and mirrors. That is why he is desperate for the trust fund. That is why he needs custody. He does not want your daughter. He wants the $2 million that comes attached to her. Without it, Thorne Enterprises collapses within 30 days. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just cruelty. It was calculation. Jasper hadn't just fallen out of love with me. He had never loved me. I was a financial instrument to him, a means to an end. Arthur reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm and callous, the hand of a man who had built a city from the ground up. "Say the word, Elizabeth," he said softly. "Just one word. I can make a phone call right now. Before lunch is over. Jasper Thorne will be arrested for fraud. His company will be seized. His mistress will be blacklisted from every social circle in the state. I can crush them like insects. I can make it so that the name Thorne is whispered only as a cautionary tale." It was a tempting offer. God, it was tempting. To let Arthur unleash his wrath. To sit back and watch the fire consume them while I held my daughter in safety. It would be easy. It would be quick. But then I looked at the bassinet. I looked at the sleeping face of the daughter they had called unremarkable. I looked at the text message where they planned to paint me as insane. If Arthur destroyed them now, I would just be the victim who was saved by her rich godfather. I would be the poor little orphan girl who couldn't fight her own battles. And Jasper, he would claim he was a victim of the big bad Sterling Empire. He would play the martyr. "No," I said. Arthur raised an eyebrow. "No. I don't want you to destroy him," I said, my voice gaining strength, the tremble disappearing. "I want to do it." A slow, wolfish smile spread across Arthur's face. It was the smile of a teacher watching a student finally understand the lesson. "I don't want them to just lose their money," I continued, the plan forming in my mind with crystal clarity. "Money is too easy. They are narcissists. Uncle Arthur, they feed on admiration. They feed on status. I want to take their pride. I want to take their reputation. I want to humiliate them so profoundly that they can never show their faces in this city again. I want them to think they have won, right up until the moment the floor drops out from under them." Arthur nodded, his eyes gleaming with approval. "The long game, it is more dangerous, but the victory is far sweeter." "I need resources," I said. "I have nothing, no money, no lawyers. Jasper controls everything." "You have me," Arthur corrected. "And because you have me, you have everything." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a slim leather card holder. He extracted a single card, black titanium, heavy and cold, and placed it in my palm. "This is unlinked to the Sterling main accounts," he said. "It is untraceable. There is no limit. Buy what you need. Bribe who you must. Build your arsenal." Then he pulled out a gold-plated fountain pen and scribbled a number on a napkin. This is the direct line to my private team. Lawyers, forensic accountants, private investigators, the best in the country. They answer to no one but you. They are already briefed and waiting for your command. They will build the shell companies you need. They will gather the dirt, but they will remain in the shadows. To the world. You are still Betty the nurse. To the world, I repeated, closing my fingers over the black card. I am the victim. Exactly, Arthur said. Arthur. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you are weak. Let Jasper believe his plan is working. Feed his ego until it is fat enough for the slaughter. He stood up. Smoothing his jacket, the transformation in the room was complete. The air no longer felt sterile and hopeless. It felt charged with electricity. One more thing, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. You are my blood, Elizabeth, not by biology, but by the bond I swore to your father. If Jasper, or his mother, or that woman, or anyone else, touches a hair on your head or lays a finger on my granddaughter, the game ends, and I will burn the world down to find them. Do you understand? I understand, I said, but they won't touch me, because they won't see me coming. Arthur leaned down and kissed my forehead. Rest now. Recover. When you walk out of these doors, you are no longer Betty Larkins. You are a Sterling. Act like one. He turned and walked to the door. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The bodyguards outside parted like the Red Sea, and he disappeared into the corridor. I was alone again, but the silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was pregnant with possibility. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The pain of the stitches was still there, a sharp reminder of the physical trauma I had endured, but it felt distant now, like a noise in another room. I stood up, my legs wobbly but holding. I walked to the window. St. Mary's Hope was situated on a hill, overlooking the city skyline. I could see the skyscrapers piercing the gray clouds, the arteries of traffic clogging the highways, the river winding through the concrete jungle. Somewhere out there, Jasper was eating lunch with his mother, probably laughing about how easy it was to manipulate me, probably toasting to their future wealth with another glass of wine. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. My reflection stared back at me. The pale, frightened girl from yesterday was gone. In her place was a woman with eyes as hard as the titanium card in her hand. They wanted to play games with their family fine. I would show them what a family really looked like. They wanted to talk about legacy. I would show them a legacy built on iron and blood. I looked down at the city that my godfather practically owned. Enjoy your lunch, Jasper, I whispered to the glass, because it is the last meal you will ever truly enjoy. I turned back to the room. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number Arthur had given me. This is Betty Larkins, I said when the line connected. I need a forensic audit of Thorne Enterprises, and I needed it yesterday. And find me the dirtiest, most expensive divorce lawyer who hates the name Thorne. We have work to do. The game had begun. Coming home from the hospital should have been a joyous occasion. It should have been filled with balloons, soft music, and the smell of fresh flowers. Instead, I walked into our apartment, a cramped, two-bedroom unit in a developing neighborhood that Jasper constantly complained about but refused to spend a dime to renovate, and felt like I was stepping onto a stage set. The air was stale. Dust motes danced in the sliver of sunlight cutting through the unwashed curtains. Jasper dumped my hospital bag by the door with a heavy sigh, as if carrying my mesh underwear and nursing pads was an act of Herculean labor. "Home sweet home," he muttered, checking his phone before he even took off his coat. "Look, Betty, I have to run to the office. The server crashed. Complete nightmare. You will be fine with the baby. Right, I mean. That is what women do." He didn't wait for an answer. He pecked me on the cheek, a dry, soulless contact, and was out the door before I could even take my coat off. I stood there in the silence, holding the car seat where my daughter, now named Clara, slept soundly. The apartment felt smaller than I remembered. The peeling paint in the hallway, the dripping faucet in the kitchen, the stained rug. It all looked different now, before. These were just quirks of our starter home, things we would fix together. Now, they were symbols of his neglect. He drove an Italian sports car, yet he made his wife and newborn live in a place with drafty windows. "It is okay, Clara," I whispered, setting the carrier down on the coffee table. "We won't be here long." The next few weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Jasper's strategy was subtle at first, then increasingly aggressive. He was gaslighting me, trying to fracture my reality so that when he finally made his move for custody, I would already be broken. "Did you take your meds, Betty?" he would ask over dinner, watching me with narrowed eyes. "You seem manic. You are forgetting things again. I told you I would be late tonight. We discussed it this morning. Don't you remember?" We hadn't discussed it. He hadn't said a word. But I would look down at my plate, forcing my hands to tremble, playing the part. "I am sorry, Jasper," I would stammer. "I am just so tired. Maybe I did forget. The baby keeps me up." "It is the hormones," he would say, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "You are not yourself. Maybe you should see a therapist. Mother thinks you are showing signs of severe postpartum depression, paranoia, memory loss. It is concerning. Betty, very concerning." He was laying the groundwork. I could see the bricks being stacked one by one. But while he was building a cage, I was digging a tunnel. One Tuesday evening, after a dinner of takeout Thai food that he complained was too spicy, I decided to bait the trap. "Jasper," I said, picking at my pad thai, "I got a letter today, from the executor of my grandmother's estate." Jasper didn't look up from his tablet. "I thought your grandmother died penniless in a nursing home." "She did," I lied smoothly. "But apparently, there was a small insurance policy, an old one she forgot about. It finally cleared the probate." Jasper's head snapped up. The word policy had triggered his predator instinct. "How small is small?" "About $250,000, I said, keeping my voice casual. The change in his demeanor was instantaneous. It was like watching a wilting flower suddenly bloom under a heat lamp. He put down his tablet. He leaned across the table, his eyes wide and hungry. $250,000, he repeated. "Betty, that is fantastic news. Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "I was going to put it in a savings account," I said, shrugging. "For Clara's college fund." "Savings account?" Jasper scoffed, laughing as if I had suggested burning the money. "Betty, sweetheart, inflation is at 4%. A savings account is losing money. You can't be that naive." "Well, what should I do?" I asked, widening my eyes in feigned ignorance. "I am not good with these things, Jasper. You know that." He reached out and took my hand, squeezing it. "That is why you have me. Look, the company is about to launch a massive new project, high yield, low risk. If you invest that money into Thorn Enterprises, I can triple it in 2 years. Triple it, Betty. Think about Clara. Don't you want her to go to an Ivy League school?" I hesitated, biting my lip. "I don't know, Jasper. Investing sounds risky. Maybe I should just... Do you trust me?" He cut me off, staring deep into my eyes. "I am your husband. I am the father of your child. Who else is going to look out for your best interests?" I looked at him, at the man who left me in labor to party on a yacht, and I smiled. "I trust you, Jasper. Good girl," he said, patting my hand. "I will have the papers drawn up tomorrow." "But," I added, pausing just long enough to make him nervous, "my grandmother was weird about money. In her will, she said I can only invest if I review the company books, just to be safe. It is a superstition thing. I promised her." Jasper stiffened. "Review the books, Betty. You wouldn't understand them. It is complex corporate accounting." "I know," I said, looking down at my lap. "But I promised. Just let me look at them for an hour, just so I can tell her spirit I did it. Then I will sign the check." Greed is a powerful blinder. Jasper weighed the risk. He looked at me, the tired, frazzled, depressed wife in sweatpants, and decided I was too stupid to find anything incriminating. Fine, he said, rolling his eyes. If it makes you feel better, I will bring the ledgers home tomorrow. The next night, he brought them, not the real ones. Of course, he brought a sanitized version, a set of cooked books designed to fool investors. He dumped the stack of binders on the dining table and went to take a shower, whistling a cheerful tune. He didn't know that while he was showering, I wasn't just looking at the binders, I was photographing them. And I wasn't just Betty the nurse. I held a master's degree in economics from the University of Chicago. Obtained under my maiden name before I met him, a degree I had never mentioned because Jasper didn't like women who were too intellectual. I opened the binders. To the untrained eye, they looked professional: revenue streams, overhead costs, projected growth, but within 10 minutes, I saw the cracks. The marketing expenses were astronomical: $50,000 a month to a firm called Blue Horizon Media. I quickly cross-referenced the name on my phone using the database Arthur's team had given me access to. Blue Horizon Media didn't have a website. It was registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. Then there were the consulting fees. Hundreds of thousands of dollars paid to Vance Global Solutions, Serena's father's company. But there were no invoices attached, just payments. I flipped to the tax returns. They were reporting a loss to the IRS to avoid taxes, yet showing a profit to the bank to secure loans. It was classic, textbook fraud, double bookkeeping, money laundering. I felt a thrill of adrenaline. This wasn't just incompetence, it was a felony. I heard the water turn off in the bathroom. I quickly closed the binders and sat back, looking confused and overwhelmed. When Jasper walked out, toweling his hair, I looked up at him. "Wow," I said. "There are so many numbers. It gives me a headache." He smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "I told you, babe. It is complicated stuff. So did you satisfy the ghost of Grandma?" "Yes," I said. "I will write the check tomorrow." He beamed. "Smart choice. But I needed more. The books were good, but I needed the digital trail. I needed the emails. I needed the smoking gun that linked him directly to Serena and the illegal transfers. For the next week, I played the waiting game. I transferred the $250,000 money Arthur had provided into the company account. Jasper was ecstatic. He bought a new watch the next day. He didn't even try to hide it. "A gift from a client," he lied when I asked about the Rolex on his wrist. Meanwhile, Serena Vance began to appear everywhere. She was suddenly a strategic partner for Thorne Enterprises. She showed up in the local business journals. Standing next to Jasper at ribbon cuttings. "Isn't that the woman whose father is your rival?" I asked one morning, pointing at the newspaper on the counter. "Keep your friends close and your enemies closer," Jasper said dismissively. "She is useful. Betty, don't be jealous. It is unbecoming." Jealous. No. I was patient. I needed access to his laptop. He guarded it like a dragon guarding gold. He took it to work. He brought it home. He even took it into the bathroom sometimes. But everyone has a weakness. Jasper's weakness was deep sleep, induced by the heavy scotch he drank every night to manage his stress on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after I came home. Jasper passed out on the sofa after half a bottle of Glenfiddich. His laptop was open on the coffee table. I waited until his breathing turned into a rhythmic snore. I crept out of the bedroom, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I knelt by the table. The screen had gone dark. I tapped the spacebar. Enter password. I typed in 0615. Access granted. My heart was hammered in my throat. I plugged in the high-speed flash drive Arthur's team had given me. It wasn't a normal drive. It was loaded with extraction software that would copy everything: emails, deleted files, browser history in under 5 minutes. I watched the progress bar. 20%. Jasper shifted on the couch. I froze. 45%. He mumbled something in his sleep. Serena, 70%. Come on, I whispered. Come on. 100%. Download complete. I yanked the drive out just as Jasper groaned and rolled over. I scrambled back into the shadows of the hallway, my chest heaving. I had it. The next day, While Jasper was at work, I met with Arthur's lead forensic accountant, a man named Mr. Silas who looked like a librarian but had the eyes of a shark. We met in a private room at the back of a nondescript diner. I handed him the drive. "Tell me what I have." "Mr." Silas plugged it into his tablet. He scrolled for a few minutes, his eyebrows raising higher and higher. "Mrs. Thorne," he said finally, "this is extensive. He has a secret folder labeled Exit Strategy. It contains drafts of divorce papers. He has already transferred your investment, the $250,000, into an offshore account under Serena Vance's name. He is skimming off the top of his own company's loans. If the IRS sees this, he goes to prison for 10 years. If the bank sees this, they foreclose immediately." "Good," I said. "Keep it safe." "But we are not done yet." "There is something else," Silas said. "The emails indicate he is terrified of his secretary, a woman named Linda. Apparently, she found a discrepancy last month and he threatened to fire her if she spoke up. Linda. I knew Linda. She was a quiet woman in her 50s. A single mother who had worked for the Thorne family for 20 years. Jasper treated her like furniture. He made her pick up his dry cleaning, fetch his coffee, and lie to his creditors. I knew my next move. That afternoon, I went to the Thorne Enterprises building. I didn't go up to the executive suite. I waited in the lobby cafe. At 12:15, just like clockwork, Linda came down for her lunch break, a sad-looking sandwich she brought from home. I approached her table. "Linda?" She looked up, startled. "Mrs. Thorne? Oh, Betty, I didn't know you were coming in today. Jasper is in a meeting with—" She trailed off, looking guilty. "With Serena," I finished for her. Linda looked down. "Yes." I sat down opposite her. "I am not here to see Jasper. I am here to see you." "Me?" She looked terrified. "Did I do something wrong? Please, I can't lose this job. My son is in physical therapy, and the insurance—" "I know," I said gently. "I know Jasper threatens you. Linda, I know he makes you lie for him. I know he hasn't given you a raise in 5 years despite the extra workload." Tears welled up in her eyes. "He says the company is broke. He says I should be grateful." "He is lying," I said. "He is stealing from the company, Linda, and when the ship sinks, and it will sink, he is going to blame you. He has already set up the paperwork to make it look like the accounting errors are your fault." Linda's face went white. "What? No, he wouldn't." "He would," I said. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of an email draft I had found on his computer, where he discussed pinning the negligence on the administrative staff with his lawyer. Linda read it, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a sob. "I have been loyal to this family for 2 decades. How could he—" "Because he is a monster," I said. "But you don't have to go down with him." I placed another envelope on the table. "This is a cashier's check for $50,000. It is a signing bonus." "Signing bonus for what?" she asked, trembling. "For your new job," I said. "Working for me. I need someone on the inside. Linda, I need someone to tell me his schedule, to forward me his meeting notes, to let me know exactly when he thinks he is safe, and when this blows up. I promise you, you will have a better job with full benefits at Sterling Industries waiting for you." She looked at the check. It was more money than she made in a year. She looked at the email where Jasper planned to frame her. She looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't see the meek wife. She saw the rebellion. Linda wiped her eyes. She took a deep breath. And then she slid the check into her purse. "He has a meeting with the bank next Friday," Linda whispered. "He is presenting the fake audit to secure a bridge loan. Serena will be there." "Perfect," I said. "Keep me posted." I walked out of the building into the bright afternoon sun. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the prey was walking right into the crosshairs, thinking he was the king of the jungle. Jasper Thorne thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I had already flipped the board. The celebration of my daughter's first month of life was not a family gathering. It was a trade show. The venue was a sprawling pseudo-Victorian estate in the hills of Silver Lake, a property that Jasper had leased for the weekend at an exorbitant rate. He claimed it was necessary to project the right image for the company's resurgence, but I knew the truth. It was a stage set. The antique furniture was rented, the art on the walls was reproduction, and the air of old money that permeated the halls was as artificial as the smile plastered on my mother-in-law's face. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the swelling crowd of local elites, investors, and hangers-on. I felt less like a hostess and more like a prop. "Stop fidgeting," Elena hissed, appearing at my elbow like a specter in black velvet. "And for heaven's sake, try to look less like a frightened deer. You are embarrassing us." I looked down at myself. Elena had personally selected my attire for the evening. It was a shapeless, mouse-gray dress made of a scratchy wool blend that stifled me in the warm, indoor heating. It was a garment designed for a governess in a period drama, not the wife of a CEO in the 21st century. It was calculated to make me look frumpy, tired, and utterly devoid of sexual appeal. "It itches," I said quietly. "It is modest," Elena corrected, adjusting her diamond brooch. "We need people to see you as the mother, the domestic anchor. Leave the glamour to those who can carry it," as if on cue. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Serena Vance made her entrance. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Serena did not walk. She shimmered into the foyer. She was wearing a dress of liquid gold silk that clung to every curve of her body, plunging daringly low in the front and back. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of expensive extensions, and her lips were painted a predatory crimson. She was the sun to my shadow, exactly as Elena had orchestrated. Jasper, who had been holding court near the open bar with a glass of scotch in hand, practically sprinted across the room to greet her. He took her hand, kissing the air near her cheek with a familiarity that made several guests exchange knowing glances. "Serena," Jasper announced, his voice booming a little too loudly. "So glad you could make it. Everyone, this is the brilliant mind behind our new strategic partnership." I descended the stairs slowly, clutching the banister. My daughter, the guest of honor, was currently sleeping in a nursery on the second floor, watched by a nanny I had hired with Arthur's money, a woman named Greta who was actually a retired police officer on my payroll. I would not let these people near Clara without a guard dog. "Betty," Serena called out as I reached the bottom step. Her voice was like syrup laced with arsenic. "Oh, look at you. You look so comfortable, very maternal." She handed me a gift box wrapped in silver paper. "For the little one, I figured she needed something aspirational." I opened the box in front of the small circle of onlookers that had formed. Inside was a baby onesie. It was 3 sizes too big, made of stiff synthetic material, and emblazoned across the chest in bold navy letters were the words, "Future Intern at Vance Global." A ripple of polite, confused laughter went through the group. It wasn't a gift. It was a branding exercise. It was a joke at my daughter's expense. "Thank you, Serena," I said, keeping my face impassive. "I will use it as a dust rag. It feels absorbent." The laughter died instantly. Jasper's eyes widened in warning. Serena's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "You are hilarious, Betty, always the joker. Though I suppose when you spend all day wiping spit up, your standards for fashion drop." Elena stepped in, sensing the tension, but only to twist the knife further. She clapped her hands for attention. "Everyone, please, a toast to my son, Jasper, who is steering our family legacy into a golden age, and to Serena, a true modern woman, ambitious, beautiful, powerful. It is so refreshing to see a woman who builds empires rather than just populating them." She gestured vaguely at me with the word populating. The guests chuckled. It was a public execution of my dignity. I was the breeder, the cow in the field. Serena was the racehorse. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a cold, simmering rage. I watched Jasper raise his glass to Serena, ignoring me completely. He looked at her with the adoration he had denied his own child. "I need some air," I mumbled, stepping away from the suffocating circle. I retreated to a small alcove near the library, hidden by a large potted fern and a velvet curtain. It was a strategic position. Arthur had taught me that in every room, there is a spot where you can see without being seen and hear without being heard. I didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, Jasper and Serena drifted toward the library door. Assuming they were out of earshot, they were laughing, the sound distinct over the dull roar of the party. "Did you see her face?" Serena giggled, the sound sharp and cruel. "She actually thinks that dress looks good. She looks like a potato sack." "Mother chose it," Jasper said, his voice slurring slightly. He was on his third scotch. "God, she is such a drag. All she talks about is the baby. Clara did this. Clara needs that. It is exhausting." "You poor thing," Serena cooed. "At least you got away for the birth. I still laugh when I think about you texting me from the marina while she was pushing." My breath hitched. I pressed myself against the wall, my fingernails digging into my palms. "Best decision of my life," Jasper said, and I heard the clink of ice in his glass. I couldn't handle the screaming. It is so visceral, disgusting. Really, being on the boat with you, under the stars that was civilized, that was where I belong. "And soon," Serena whispered. "You will be there permanently. Once we get the custody settled and the trust fund clears, we can drop the dead weight." "Cheers to that," Jasper said. They moved on, heading toward the garden for a smoke. I stood there for a moment, shaking, disgusting. He found the birth of his daughter disgusting. He found my pain inconvenient. I took a deep breath, smoothing the rough fabric of my gray dress. Good. I thought, let them be cruel. It makes pulling the trigger so much easier. I stepped out of the alcove and scanned the room. I wasn't looking for Jasper anymore. I was hunting for a specific target. And there he was, standing near the fireplace, looking bored and slightly skeptical. Was Mr. Thomas Harrison. He was the senior vice president of commercial lending at First City Bank, the institution that held the mortgage on the Thorne family home, the company headquarters, and the loans Jasper was currently defaulting on. More importantly, Thomas Harrison was a man who played golf with Arthur Sterling every Sunday morning. He didn't know I was Arthur's goddaughter. Arthur kept his private life very private, but he knew Arthur valued integrity above all else. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and made my way toward him. I adopted a posture of uncertainty, hunched shoulders, eyes darting nervously. I needed to look like the naive wife who was overwhelmed by the big, bad world of finance. "Mr. Harrison," I asked softly. He turned, surprised to be addressed by the wallflower. "Mrs. Thorne, a pleasure, lovely party." "Oh, thank you," I said, offering a weak smile. "I hope you don't mind me bothering you. Jasper is so busy with Serena, and I have a question that is keeping me up at night. Jasper says I'm being silly, but I know you are a genius with numbers." Harrison's ego was stroked. He puffed out his chest slightly. "I have been in banking for 30 years. My dear, what is the trouble?" "Well," I began, lowering my voice as if sharing a shameful secret. "I recently received a small inheritance, $250,000. Jasper insisted I invested into the company immediately. He said it was critical for what he called it, the bridge liquidity." Harrison frowned. "Bridge liquidity? Thorne Enterprises shouldn't need a bridge loan if the quarterly reports Jasper sent me are accurate. He reported a 20% growth in revenue." I blinked, feigning confusion. 20%. That is strange. I saw the internal ledger the other night, I mean. I think it was the ledger, and it showed that we were paying $50,000 a month to a marketing firm in the Cayman Islands. Is that normal? Jasper said it was for global positioning, but it seemed like a lot of money for a company that well. "Honestly, Mr. Harrison, we are renting this house because the bank threatened to foreclose on our own home last month." Harrison went very still. The glass of wine in his hand stopped midway to his mouth. Foreclosed Mrs. Thorne, your husband, told the board that the mortgage payments were up to date. He provided documentation. Oh, maybe I am wrong, I said quickly, waving my hand in a panic. I am just a nurse. I don't understand these things. But the letter from the bank was read, and it said, Notice of default. And then there are the other loans, the ones from the men with the tattoos. Jasper pays them in cash every Friday. He calls it off-book operating expenses. Is that a standard banking term? Harrison's face turned the color of ash. Off-book cash payments. He looked across the room at Jasper, who was laughing loudly and spilling his drink. The look in Harrison's eyes shifted from boredom to the sharp, cold calculation of a man realizing his investment was toxic. Mrs. Thorne, Harrison said, his voice low and urgent. Did you sign any paperwork for this investment of yours? Did you see where the money went? I wrote the check to the company, I said. But Jasper said he had to move it to a holding account called Serena V Consulting to avoid taxes. He said you guys at the bank wouldn't understand the synergy. Harrison set his glass down on the mantelpiece with a clatter. Synergy, he repeated, the word tasting like bile. He is moving capital to a competitor's personal account while defaulting on secured loans. Is that bad? I asked, wide-eyed. It is embezzlement, Mrs. Thorne, Harrison said grimly. And it is fraud. He pulled out his phone. Excuse me, I need to make a call to my risk management team. Tonight. Oh, please don't tell Jasper I asked, I pleaded, touching his arm. He gets so angry when I ask questions. He says I am too stupid to understand high finance. You are not stupid. Mrs. Thorne, Harrison said, looking at me with a newfound respect, or perhaps just pity for the disaster he saw coming. In fact, you might be the only honest person in this room. He walked away, heading straight for the exit, his phone already pressed to his ear. I watched him go, a small, cold smile touching my lips. I had just lit the fuse. What did you say to him? The voice was a growl in my ear, a hand clamped down on my upper arm, hard enough to bruise. I turned to see Jasper. His face was flushed, his eyes wild. He had seen Harrison leave. He had seen the way Harrison looked at him with disgust. Jasper, you are hurting me, I said, pulling my arm away. Harrison just walked out without saying goodbye, Jasper hissed, leaning in close so the guests wouldn't hear. He looked furious. You were talking to him. What did you say? Did you embarrass me? Did you talk about the baby's colic? I told you to keep your mouth shut. I just asked him about investing, I said, shrinking back. I wanted to make sure our future was safe. You idiot, Jasper spat. You know nothing. You are a liability. Betty, look at you, in that dress, standing there like a statue. You are ruining my image. Serena is out there charming the entire city, and you are driving away my biggest banker. I was just trying to help, I whispered, letting tears well up in my eyes. Don't help, Jasper snarled. Go upstairs. Go to the nursery and stay there. Don't come down until everyone is gone. You are banned from speaking to any more VIPs. Do you understand? You are not to open your mouth again. He shoved me slightly toward the stairs. I stumbled, catching myself. I looked at him at the sweat on his brow, the fear behind his aggression. He was unraveling. The pressure was mounting. Okay, Jasper, I said softly. I will go. I won't say another word. I turned and walked up the grand staircase. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me, the poor, banished wife. I kept my head down, playing the part of the defeated victim. But as I reached the landing and turned the corner, out of sight of the party below, I straightened my spine. I wiped the fake tears from my eyes. I walked down the hallway to the nursery. I opened the door to find Greta, the bodyguard nanny, sitting by the crib, cleaning a very large, very real gun that she quickly tucked away when I entered. Everything okay, Mrs. Thorne? She asked. Everything is perfect. Greta, I said, walking to the window to watch Mr. Harrison's car speed away down the driveway. The rats are starting to turn on each other. I look down at my sleeping daughter. "Happy 1-month birthday." "Clara," I whispered. "Mommy just bought you a bank for a present." The rain in the city was relentless that Tuesday, a gray curtain that washed the streets clean of dust, but could not touch the rot festering inside the high-rise offices of Thorne Enterprises. I sat in the back of a black sedan with tinted windows, parked in an alleyway behind an unassuming brick building in the garment district. It was a location that did not exist on any digital map associated with the Sterling Empire. The door opened, and I slipped inside, shaking the water from my umbrella. Arthur was waiting for me in a room that smelled of cedar and old leather. There were no windows, only walls lined with books and a single, heavy oak table in the center. "You look different, Elizabeth," Arthur said, not looking up from the file he was reading. "You look like you have stopped bleeding." "I have," I said, pulling out the chair opposite him. "I am done bleeding. I am ready to start cutting." Arthur slid a thick black binder across the table. "Then here is your knife." I opened the binder. It was the incorporation papers for a private equity firm registered in Delaware under the name Aletheia Holdings. Aletheia, the Greek concept of truth and disclosure. It was a shadow fund, a financial ghost ship fully funded by Arthur's private reserves, but completely untraceable to him. "You are the sole signatory," Arthur explained, his voice low and precise. "As of this morning, Aletheia Holdings has been aggressively acquiring high-risk debt in the local market, specifically the distressed assets of a certain failing construction conglomerate." I looked at the documents. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. "You bought his debt." "No," Arthur corrected, a small, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "You did. The bank was all too happy to offload the Thorne accounts after your little chat with Mr. Harrison at the party. He spooked the board. They designated the loans as toxic. They sold them to us for 60 cents on the dollar just to get them off their books." I ran my fingers over the papers. I now owned Jasper's mortgage. I owned his business loans. I owned the credit line he used to pay for his mistress's apartment. I was no longer just his wife. I was his creditor. I held the leash. "There is more," Arthur said. "The building at 44 Grand Street, the one that houses his headquarters." "He rents the top 3 floors," I said. "Not anymore," Arthur replied. "The landlord was facing liquidity issues. Aletheia Holdings made him a cash offer this morning. We close escrow on Friday." I sat back. The magnitude of the power shift settling over me. Jasper Thorne, the man who thought he was a king, was now living in my house, working in my building, and spending my money. And he didn't have a clue. "He will think he has been saved," I whispered. "Let him," Arthur said. "Let him feel the relief. Let him relax. That is when you strike." When I returned to the apartment that evening, the atmosphere had shifted. For weeks, the air had been thick with tension and Jasper's sullen moods. But tonight, the lights were on. Jazz music was playing, and there was a bottle of vintage wine open on the counter. Jasper was pacing the living room, looking more animated than I had seen him in years. He grabbed me by the shoulders as soon as I walked in, planting a wet, excited kiss on my cheek. "Betty, you won't believe it," he shouted, spinning me around. "It is a miracle, a literal miracle." I feigned confusion, dropping my purse. "What happened? Did you win the lottery?" "Better." He poured himself a glass of wine, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The bank was breathing down my neck, threatening to pull the plug. But out of nowhere, this investment group contacted us, Aletheia Holdings. They bought out our entire debt portfolio, every single cent. "That sounds complicated," I said, widening my eyes. "Is that good?" "Good it is salvation." Jasper laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "They are silent partners. They just want the interest payments. They don't care about operations. They don't care about the audits. They just want to park their money. It buys me time. Betty, it buys me years." I am so happy for you, Jasper, I said, walking to the kitchen to hide the cold smirk on my face. Does this mean we are safe? We are untouchable, he declared, raising his glass to the ceiling. I told you I would fix it. I told you I was a businessman. These investors see potential. They see genius. He didn't see genius. He saw a mirror reflecting his own arrogance. He thought Alethea Holdings was a group of faceless suits. He didn't know the chairman of the board was currently washing his baby's bottles in the sink. Oh, and get this, Jasper continued, leaning against the counter. Our landlord sold the building. The new owners sent over a lease renewal today. They lowered the rent by 10%. Can you believe my luck? You must have a guardian angel, I said dryly. I am better than an angel, he scoffed. I have charm. I knew things would turn around. He was high on his own supply, but the high made him careless. 2 days later, he tried to pin me down. He came home with a stack of documents, personal guarantee forms for a new line of credit he wanted to open to expand the business now that the pressure was off. Just sign here, babe, he said, sliding a pen across the table while I was feeding Clara. It is just a formality. The new partners want to see family unity. I looked at the paper. It was a joint liability clause. If I signed it, I would be personally responsible for his next $1 million of debt. I put the spoon down. I looked at my hand. I let it tremble. Just a little. I can't, Jasper, I said, my voice wavering. What do you mean? You can't? His smile faltered. My hand, I lied. It has been cramping since birth. The doctor said it is a calcium deficiency. I can't hold a pen steady enough for a legal signature. Look, I picked up the pen and let it skitter across the paper, making a jagged, illegible scratch. Betty, stop playing games, Jasper snapped. Just focus. I am trying, I cried, putting on the waterworks. Why are you yelling at me? I am in pain. You know I'm still recovering. Why do you always make it about money? He slammed his hand on the table, making Clara jump. Because money is what keeps a roof over your head. Fine, forget it. I will forge it, I will handle it later. He snatched the papers away, muttering about my incompetence. He didn't notice that I had already recorded the conversation on my phone, capturing his slip of the tongue about forgery, another nail in the coffin. While Jasper was celebrating his luck, Serena was losing her patience. My spy, Linda, forwarded me a chain of emails between them that were becoming increasingly hysterical. Serena, you said the debt was gone. You said we were clear. Why haven't you filed the papers yet? My father is asking questions. I am not going to wait forever. Jasper, I am not going to be the mistress when I should be the wife. Jasper, calm down. Baby, the gala is coming up. I can't file before the city business gala. It would look bad to the new investors if I am in the middle of a messy divorce. I need to present a stable front. Just wait until the Monday after the gala. I promise, I will kick her out on the street. Serena, you better, because if I don't have a ring by the end of the month, I am walking the city business gala, the most prestigious event of the year, the night where the city's elite gathered to pat each other on the back. It was 2 weeks away. I knew that was my deadline. The following weekend, Jasper announced he had to go to Albany for a regulatory conference. It is a bore, he said, packing his silk ties. But I have to show my face. I will be gone for 2 nights. I will miss you, I said. Call me before bed. If I can, he said. The reception at the conference center is terrible. He kissed me goodbye and drove off. 10 minutes later, I was on the phone with the private investigator Arthur had recommended, a man named Vance, no relation to Serena, who charged $500 an hour and was worth every penny. He is not going to Albany, is he? I asked. No, ma'am, Vance replied. He is currently pulling into the valet parking at the street, Regis downtown, and Miss Vance just arrived in a separate taxi. They have booked the presidential suite. Get me everything, I said. I want photos of them at dinner. I want photos of them in the lobby. I want room service receipts. I want to see the color of the bathrobe he is wearing." "Consider it done," Vance said. That night, while Jasper was supposedly suffering through a regulatory conference, my phone buzzed with images. High-definition photos of Jasper and Serena holding hands at a candlelit table. Jasper feeds her a strawberry. Serena laughed, throwing her head back, her hand resting on his knee, and the money shot the two of them entering the elevator. Jasper's hand firmly on her lower back, his face buried in her hair. I printed them out. I put them in a folder labeled Exhibit A. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal and his financial crimes. The divorce papers were already drafted. My lawyer, a shark named Mr. Sterling, who had personally vetted and paid for, had drawn up a document that was essentially a surrender treaty. It gave me full custody, full assets, and alimony that would bleed him dry. But I didn't sign them, not yet. If I served him now, he would fight. He would hide assets. He would lie. I needed to break him publicly. I needed to strip him of his armor so that when the papers landed on his desk, he would have no choice but to sign them just to make the pain stop. The phone rang. It was Arthur. "Are you ready, Elizabeth?" he asked. "I am ready," I said. "Good," Arthur said, "because I have just finalized the guest list for the gala. I am making a speech this year, a special announcement." "What kind of announcement?" I asked. "I am 70 years old." Arthur said, "It is time the city knew who would inherit the Sterling Empire. Everyone assumes I have no heir. They think when I die, the sharks will feast on my company. I intend to correct that misconception." I understood immediately. He wasn't just going to expose Jasper. He was going to elevate me. He was going to turn the poor, abandoned housewife into the crown princess of the city. "Jasper is going to be there," I said. "He thinks he is bringing Serena as his date." "Let him," Arthur chuckled darkly. "Let him bring his whore to court. It will make the coronation all the more entertaining." I hung up the phone and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the drab, gray clothes that Elena forced me to wear. In the back, hidden behind a garment bag, was a box that had arrived that morning from a couturier in Paris. I unzipped the bag. The fabric inside shimmered like liquid moonlight. It was a dress made for a queen, not a victim. I ran my hand over the silk. Jasper wanted a show. He wanted to present a stable front. I was going to give him a show he would never forget. The gala would not be his victory lap. It would be his funeral, and I would be the one delivering the eulogy. The invitation to the city business gala sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded gun. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored with gold-embossed lettering, and it smelled of expensive paper and exclusivity. I had retrieved it from the mail pile before Jasper came home. But I made the mistake of leaving it out, testing him. When Jasper walked in, shaking the rain off his umbrella, his eyes went straight to the card. He didn't smile. He snatched it up, his knuckles turning white. "I didn't know we were invited," I said, keeping my voice light as I chopped carrots for a stew he would likely complain about. "It says, Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. That means me too. Right, I haven't been to a party since the wedding. I could wear my blue dress." Jasper let out a sharp, derisive laugh. He tossed the invitation onto the counter as if it were a piece of junk mail. "Your blue dress, the one you bought at the outlet mall 3 years ago, Betty? Be serious. This isn't a church potluck. This is the gala. Senators will be there, billionaires, the mayor." "I know," I said, turning to face him. "But I am your wife. People will expect to see me." "People expect to see success," Jasper countered, loosening his tie. "And frankly, look at you. You have bags under your eyes. You still haven't lost the baby weight. You would look like a fish out of water. And you would drag me down with you. I need to network. Betty, I need to charm people. I can't do that if I am babysitting you and worrying about you spilling red wine on a diplomat." "So you are going alone?" I asked, stinging him with the question I knew the answer to. I am taking a colleague, he lied effortlessly. Someone who knows the business, someone who can help me close deals. It is work. Betty, purely work. Besides, tickets are $5,000 a plate. We can't afford a ticket for you just so you can stand in the corner and eat shrimp. He didn't know that the table he had purchased was actually gifted to him by Alethea Holdings, my company. And he certainly didn't know that I had already reserved the entire balcony level for my own party. Okay, I said, turning back to the carrots. I understand. You are right. I would just be an embarrassment. Exactly, he said, relieved that I had rolled over so easily. I am doing this for us, for the image. The next morning, the humiliation continued. I was feeding Clara when the front door opened without a knock. Elena Thorne breezed in, followed by an interior designer who looked like he smelled something bad. Mother, Jasper hadn't mentioned she was coming. Don't get up, Elena commanded, waving a hand at me as if I were a servant taking a break. We are just taking some measurements. She marched into the master bedroom, my bedroom, and began pointing at the walls. This hideous beige has to go. We need something bolder, charcoal, perhaps, and that bed frame is an eyesore. We need a king-sized platform, something modern. I stood in the doorway, clutching Clara to my chest. Elena, what are you doing? We aren't renovating. Elena turned to me, her smile thin and venomous. Jasper didn't tell you. He feels the energy in here is stale. He wants a refresh, a new start for the new phase of his career, and since you are so busy with the baby, he asked me to oversee it. He wants to change our bedroom, I asked. He wants to change the bedroom, she corrected. And frankly, dear, you and the baby are taking up a lot of space. Jasper needs his rest. He is a CEO now. He can't be woken up by crying every 2 hours. I think it is best if you move your things into the guest room down the hall. It is quieter there, better for the child. She wasn't renovating for Jasper. She was renovating for Serena. She was clearing the nest so the new bird could move in. They were pushing me out of my own marriage bed before the divorce papers were even signed. I looked at the designer, who was busy measuring the space where my vanity table stood, the only piece of furniture I truly loved. I see, I said. My voice was calm, which seemed to disappoint Elena. She wanted a fight. She wanted tears. You are right, Elena. Jasper needs his sleep. I will move my things out today. Elena blinked. Oh, well, good. At least you are being sensible for once. Make sure you take everything. I don't want any clutter left behind. Don't worry, I said, holding Clara tighter. I will take everything that matters. That afternoon, I began to pack, but I didn't move my boxes to the guest room. I packed them and stacked them neatly by the service elevator in the hallway. I packed my clothes, my books, my grandmother's jewelry, and every single document I had gathered. I packed Clara's crib. When Jasper came home, he didn't even notice the boxes were gone. He was too busy pacing the living room, shouting into his phone. What do you mean you are unsure? Serena, he yelled. I told you, it is handled. The money is there. I paused in the kitchen, listening. No, I can't show you the account right now, Jasper hissed. It is in a blind trust. That is how these investors work. Why are you being so paranoid? Did someone talk to you? I smiled. The seed had been planted. 2 hours earlier, I had sat in a frantic internet cafe 3 blocks away and sent an email from an encrypted server. The subject line was simply, verify the assets. The body of the email read, Miss Vance, ask your lover why the new investors haven't countersigned the liquidity agreement yet. Ask him why the debt payoff went to a shell company in Delaware and not the bank directly. He is using your family's reputation to float a sinking ship. If you walk into that gala on his arm, you will be drowning with him. It was vague enough to be terrifying, and specific enough to ring true. I am not lying to you, Jasper screamed into the phone, slamming his hand against the wall. Fine, fine. I will bring the bank statements to the gala. You can see for yourself before we walk the red carpet. Just be ready at 6. Wear the red dress. I want to match. He hung up, breathing hard. He looked at me, standing in the doorway with a bottle of formula. "Trouble with the colleague?" I asked innocently. "Just nerves," he muttered. "Big night. High stakes. You should get some sleep," I said. "You have a big day tomorrow." The day of the gala arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. Jasper was a whirlwind of narcissistic anxiety. He spent 2 hours in the bathroom, grooming himself to perfection. He shouted at me because his cufflinks were not in the designated tray. I had moved them to the bottom drawer. He shouted because the coffee was too hot. He shouted because the baby was cooing too loudly. At 4 o'clock, he stood in the living room, dressed in a bespoke tuxedo that cost more than my car. He looked handsome, objectively speaking. He looked like the golden boy of the city. But to me, he just looked like a well-dressed corpse. "I am heading to the hotel to meet the team," he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. "We are going to pre-game before the red carpet." He turned to me. I was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, my hair tied back in a messy bun. I was the picture of the defeated housewife. "Don't wait up," he said. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and tossed it onto the coffee table. It fluttered down and landed next to an old magazine. "Order yourself a pizza or something. Treat yourself." "Thanks, Jasper," I said, staring at the bill. "Have a magical night." "Oh, I will," he smirked. "This is the night everything changes. Betty, mark my words." He walked out the door. I heard the lock click. I heard the elevator ding. I waited exactly 2 minutes. Then I stood up, walked to the door, and threw the deadbolt. "You are right, Jasper," I whispered. "Everything changes tonight." I picked up the $20 bill and dropped it into the trash can. At 4:30, the service elevator opened, but it wasn't a delivery man. It was a team of 5 people, led by a man with silver hair and a makeup kit that looked like a bomb disposal unit. "Mrs. Thorne?" the man asked. "Mr. Sterling sent us. We have 3 hours to turn a tragedy into a triumph. Let's get to work." They didn't just dress me, they reconstructed me. They washed the smell of sour milk and despair from my hair and styled it into soft, old Hollywood waves that framed my face like obsidian silk. They applied makeup that highlighted the sharp angles of my cheekbones, angles that had been hidden by exhaustion for months. They painted my lips a deep, blood-red berry color. Then came the dress. Arthur had not been subtle. The dress was a custom creation from a vault in Milan. It was midnight blue velvet, so dark it looked black in the dim light, but shimmered with a sapphire fire when it moved. It was strapless, with a structural bodice that cinched my waist and a skirt that flowed like water, with a slit that went dangerously high up my thigh. It was not a dress for a wife. It was a dress for a widow who had killed her husband and gotten away with it. "And finally," the stylist said, opening a black velvet box, "the hardware." He clasped a necklace around my neck. It was cold and heavy, diamonds, a cascade of them, ending in a sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg. It was the Sterling family heirloom, a piece of jewelry that hadn't been seen in public since Arthur's wife died 30 years ago. I looked in the mirror. Betty the nurse was gone. The woman staring back at me was terrifying. She was tall. She was regal, and her eyes held the cold, hard glint of a loaded weapon. "The car is downstairs," the stylist said, packing up his kit. "Your bags have already been transferred to the Sterling estate. The nanny and the baby are secure." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded different, deeper, smoother. I walked out of the apartment. I didn't look back. I left the lights on. I left the dirty dishes in the sink. I left the empty life behind. Downstairs, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and reflecting the city lights. A car was idling at the curb. It wasn't a taxi. It was a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, black and silver. A beast of a machine that commanded silence from the street. The back door opened. Arthur Sterling was sitting inside, wearing a tuxedo that made Jasper's look like a rental. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and his cane in the other. He looked me up and down, his eyes crinkling with pride. "My God," he said softly. You look just like your father. I slid into the leather seat, the velvet of my dress rustling softly. I feel like him too. Arthur tapped the glass partition, and the driver pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic that flowed toward the city center. The guest list is set, Arthur said, handing me a glass of champagne. Jasper and Serena just arrived. The paparazzi are eating them up. He is giving interviews about the bright future of Thorne Enterprises. He has no idea, I said, taking a sip. The bubbles tasted like iron and victory. Mr. Harrison from the bank is there, Arthur continued. He is seated at your table, along with the district attorney and the editor of the City Chronicle. I thought you might want an audience for the show. You think of everything, I said. Arthur looked out the window at the passing city. I promised I would protect you, Elizabeth, but tonight I am not protecting you. Tonight I am unleashing you. He turned to me, his face serious. Once we walk through those doors, there is no going back. You destroy him. You destroy the illusion of your marriage. And you declare war on anyone who stood by and let him hurt you. Are you sure? I thought about the hospital room. I thought about the text messages. I thought about the unremarkable comment. I thought about the $20 for pizza. I looked at my godfather, and I smiled. It was the smile of the shark that had been circling in the deep, finally breaking the surface. Drive, I said. It is time to hunt. The Rolls-Royce accelerated, gliding toward the gala like a silent missile aimed at the heart of Jasper Thorne's vanity. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, vibrating with the low hum of 1,000 conversations held by the most powerful people in the city. It was a space designed to intimidate, filled with men in tuxedos who moved armies of capital with a phone call, and women whose jewelry cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. I watched it all from the shadows of the mezzanine entrance, my hand resting lightly on Arthur Sterling's arm, through the sheer silk of the Venetian masquerade mask that covered the upper half of my face. The world looked sharp, distinct, and fragile. I was no longer Betty the nurse. I was no longer the exhausted mother in sweatpants. I was a cipher, a weapon wrapped in midnight blue velvet. Are you nervous? Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper against the swelling orchestral music. No, I said, and I was surprised to find it was the truth. I am just waiting for the curtain to rise. We began our descent. Down below, amidst the sea of black ties and designer gowns, Jasper Thorne was in his element. He stood near the center of the room, a glass of champagne in one hand. Gesturing expansively with the other, he looked every inch the conqueror he believed himself to be. His tuxedo fit perfectly, his hair was coiffed to a shine, and his smile was a blinding beam of artificial charm. Hanging on his arm, dressed in a gown of scarlet silk that screamed for attention, was Serena Vance. She looked triumphant. She was glowing with the smug satisfaction of a woman who believes she has successfully stolen another woman's life. They were a matching set, the king and queen of fools. I watched as a photographer snapped their picture. Jasper pulled Serena close, his hand resting possessively on her waist, the same waist he had held on the yacht while I was screaming in labor. Look at them, Arthur murmured, his grip on his cane tightening. Peacocks strutting before the fox. We reached the bottom of the stairs, but we did not enter the fray immediately. We waited. I could hear snippets of conversation drifting toward us. The merger is practically a done deal, Jasper was saying to a group of potential investors, his voice carrying over the crowd. We have secured a silent partner, very exclusive, Alethea Holdings. They saw the vision. They know that Thorne Enterprises is the future of this city. And the family, asked a man I recognized as a local councilman. How is the wife? I heard you just had a child. Jasper's face fell into a practiced mask of solemnity. He sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. Betty is struggling, postpartum, you know, it is tragic, really. She refuses to leave the house. She barely recognizes me some days. I try to be supportive, but she is just so fragile. I had to leave her with a full-time nurse tonight just to keep her safe. Oh, You poor man, Serena chimed in, touching his arm sympathetically. He is a saint, truly. Most men would have walked away, but Jasper is devoted to her care. I felt a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. A saint. He was painting himself as the martyr while he buried me alive, a few feet away, holding court with a group of elderly socialites. Was Elena Thorne. She was drinking a martini with a twist, her voice shrill and cutting. "It is genetics. I am afraid," Elena was saying, leaning in as if sharing a juicy secret. "Betty comes from nothing, no breeding, no resilience. She sits in that apartment all day in her pajamas, watching television. She doesn't even know how to manage the staff. I had to step in and renovate the entire house myself just to make it livable for my son. Honestly, I think Jasper made a mistake marrying beneath him. But what can a mother do?" "Is it true she is unstable?" one of the women asked, clutching her pearls. "Completely," Elena whispered loudly. "I wouldn't be surprised if she is institutionalized by Christmas, for the baby's sake. Of course." Arthur felt me stiffen beside him. He patted my hand. "Steady, Elizabeth. Let them dig the grave deep enough to hold them all." Then, Arthur tapped his cane on the marble floor. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound, but it signaled the security team. The heavy double doors behind us were thrown open fully. The lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, and a spotlight swept across the floor. Finding us, the hush was instantaneous. It started near the door and rippled outward like a wave, silencing the laughter, the gossip, and the clinking of glasses. Within 10 seconds, the room was deadly quiet. Arthur Sterling had arrived. He walked into the room not like a guest, but like the owner of the building, the city, and everyone in it. I walked beside him, my chin held high, the diamonds at my throat catching the light and scattering it in 1,000 prisms. I saw the heads turn. I saw the whispers start. "Is that Sterling?" "Who is with him?" "Look at that necklace. Is that the sapphire of Savoy?" "I haven't seen him with a woman in 30 years. We moved through the crowd, the sea of bodies parting before us. I looked straight ahead, but my peripheral vision was locked on Jasper. He had stopped mid-sentence. His mouth was slightly open. He was staring at us, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. He looked at Arthur with reverence. This was the man he wanted to be. Then he looked at me. His gaze raked over my body. He looked at the midnight velvet hugging my waist. He looked at the slit in the skirt revealing my leg. He looked at the diamonds. He didn't know me. He stared right at his own wife, the woman whose body he had memorized for 3 years. And he saw a stranger. He saw a goddess. He saw money. But he did not see Betty. I saw him lean down to Serena. "Who is that?" he whispered, his voice audible in the silence. Serena's eyes were narrowed, scanning me like a threat assessment. "I don't know," she hissed back. "But look at the jewelry. That necklace is worth more than your company. She must be royalty, or a European heiress." "She is stunning," Jasper muttered, a hunger in his eyes that I had never seen directed at me. "Do you think she is his new wife? She looks young." "Don't get any ideas," Serena snapped. But she looked nervous. She smoothed her red dress, suddenly aware that it looked cheap compared to the couture I was wearing. We reached the stage. Arthur helped me up the steps with a courtly grace. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out over the crowd. I stood a step behind him, a silent sentinel in the spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice deep and resonant, filling the cavernous room without effort. "Distinguished guests, predators, and prey." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. Arthur never joked. "I have stood on this stage for 40 years. Arthur continued. "I have watched this city grow from concrete and steel into a metropolis of innovation. I have seen fortunes made, and I have seen fortunes lost. I have seen men build empires on handshake deals, and I have seen men destroy them with a single lie." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. His gaze drifted to the front row, where Jasper had elbowed his way to the front, eager to be noticed by the Titan. "We live in an age of image," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "We live in an age where a man can paint gold over rust and call it treasure, where a man can wear a tailored suit to hide a bankrupt soul, where loyalty is a currency that has been devalued by inflation." Jasper nodded enthusiastically, clapping silently, thinking Arthur was speaking philosophically. He didn't realize the crosshairs were painted on his forehead. "For years," Arthur said, "people have asked me about my legacy. They ask, 'Arthur, who will hold the keys to the kingdom when you are gone? You have no children, you have no family,' and for a long time, I let you believe that was true." The room collectively held its breath. This was the moment. The rumor mill had been churning for decades about the sterling heir. "But a man who builds a fortress does not leave the gate unlocked," Arthur said. "I have a family. I have a daughter, not by blood, but by a bond stronger than any DNA, a bond forged in loyalty, in tragedy, and in truth." He turned to me. He extended his hand. "Tonight, I am not here to talk about business," Arthur announced, his voice rising to a crescendo. "I am here to introduce you to the future chairman of Sterling Industries. I am here to introduce you to the woman who holds the power of this city in her hands." I stepped forward. I took his hand. I walked to the microphone. The spotlight was blinding. I couldn't see the back of the room, but I could see the front row. I could see Jasper. He was beaming, practically vibrating with excitement. He was witnessing history. He was probably already calculating how he could introduce himself to this new heiress, how he could charm her, how he could use her. Serena was leaning forward, her eyes wide, hungry for the gossip. Elena was squinting, trying to see behind the mask. "Take it off, my dear," Arthur said softly, stepping back to give me the stage. "Let them see the face of judgment." I reached up with both hands. I felt the silk ribbons behind my head. I pulled. The knot came loose. Slowly, deliberately. I lowered the mask. The silence held for 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, 3. Then, a gasp ripped through the room. It wasn't a single sound. It was a collective intake of air from 500 people. I looked down. Jasper's smile didn't just fade. It disintegrated. His face went slack, the color draining out of it so fast he looked like he had been embalmed. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. Crash. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Champagne splashed onto Serena's red dress. But she didn't move. She couldn't move. She was frozen, staring at me as if I were a ghost that had crawled out of a grave to drag her down to hell. Elena Thorne let out a strangled sound, clutching her chest. She stumbled back, grabbing the arm of a waiter to keep from collapsing. Her eyes were wide with terror. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I locked eyes with Jasper. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm, sweet, and deadly. It boomed through the speakers, echoing off the gold-leafed ceiling. "Hello, husband," I said. The crowd erupted into murmurs. "Husband. Did she say husband? That's Jasper Thorne's wife. The one who is crazy." I smiled. A cold, razor-sharp smile that reached my eyes. "Do you remember me?" I asked, my voice dripping with mock affection. "I am the woman you left in the delivery room, the one you said was screaming too much, the one you abandoned to go fishing on a yacht with your mistress." I pointed a manicured finger at Serena. She flinched as if I had thrown a stone. "You look surprised, Jasper," I continued, pacing slowly across the stage, the velvet of my dress flowing around me like smoke. "Did you think I was at home, crying over my postpartum depression? Did you think I was eating the pizza you left me $20 for?" I reached into the bodice of my dress and pulled out the crumpled $20 bill I had retrieved from the trash. I held it up for the cameras. "You told me to treat myself," I said. "So I did. I treated myself to the truth." Jasper took a step back. shaking his head. "Betty," he croaked, his voice cracking. No, this is a joke. This is a joke," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. "No, Jasper, a joke is you thinking you could steal my child's trust fund. A joke is you thinking you could leverage my inheritance to save your bankrupt company. A joke is you thinking you could lie to the entire city about who I am." I turned to the crowd, addressing the stunned elite. "My name is not just Betty Thorne," I declared, my voice ringing with authority. "My name is Elizabeth Larkin Sterling, and I am the new owner of the debt that keeps Thorne Enterprises alive." I looked back at Jasper, who was now trembling visibly. "You wanted a silent partner, Jasper. You wanted an investor who wouldn't ask questions." I laughed, a dark, victorious sound. "Well, surprise," I whispered into the mic. "I am an investor, and I am not silent anymore." I signaled to the tech booth at the back of the room. "Roll the tape," behind me. A massive screen descended from the ceiling. Jasper's eyes darted to it in panic. He knew what was coming. He lunged forward, as if to stop it, but two of Arthur's security guards stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path. "No!" Jasper screamed. "Stop! Don't do this! It is too late for don't!" "Jasper," I said, stepping back as the screen flickered to life. "You wanted the spotlight. You got it." The first image appeared on the screen. It was a selfie from the yacht. The date and time were stamped in bold red letters, right next to a hospital admission record showing me in active labor at the exact same minute. The crowd gasped. The judgment was instantaneous. But that was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. "Betty, baby, wait." The shout tore from Jasper's throat, a desperate, strangled sound that cracked the heavy silence of the ballroom. The shock that had paralyzed him shattered, replaced by a frantic, animalistic need for survival. He lunged toward the stairs of the stage, his hands reaching out as if he could physically grab the air and stuff the genie back into the bottle. "It is a misunderstanding," he screamed, his face slick with sweat, his eyes darting between me and the horrified faces of the city's elite. "She is confused postpartum psychosis. She doesn't know what she is saying. I love her. I have always loved her." He made it to the first step before a wall of black wool stopped him. Arthur's head of security, a man named Stone who was built like a granite slab, stepped into Jasper's path. He didn't push Jasper. He simply occupied the space so completely that Jasper bounced off him like a bird hitting a window. "Step back, Mr. Thorne," Stone rumbled. "Get out of my way," Jasper shrieked, his tuxedo jacket tearing at the shoulder as he flailed. "That is my wife, Betty. Tell them we are happy." I looked down at him from the podium. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel pain. I felt the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "I am not confused, Jasper," I said, my voice amplified and steady. "And I am certainly not happy, but you are right about one thing. We should tell them everything." I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The screen behind me, which had been displaying the damning photo of the yacht, dissolved into static for a split second before resolving into a high-definition projection of a text message conversation. It was the thread from the night of the birth. The letters were 10 feet tall, glowing white against a black background. Sender Serena Vance. "Has the cow popped the burden, yet I am waiting at the hotel." Sender Jasper Thorne. "Just walked in. She bought the story. Playing the grieving husband now. Give me an hour." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. It was the sound of 500 people realizing they were witnessing a moral execution. I saw the mayor cover his mouth. I saw the bank CEO, Mr. Harrison, shake his head in disgust. "You called our daughter a burden," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "You called me a cow, and you did it while I was holding your child for the first time." "No!" Jasper yelled, looking around wildly. "That is fake deepfake. It is all AI." "Is your voice AI too?" I asked, The screen changed. It was now an audio waveform, a jagged green line. I pressed a button on the podium. The sound of Jasper's voice, recorded in our kitchen just 3 days ago, boomed through the plaza's state-of-the-art sound system. It was crystal clear, stripping away any possibility of denial. I can't file for divorce before the gala. It would look bad to the new investors. I need to present a stable front. Just wait until the Monday after the gala. I promise. I will kick her out on the street. She is a drag. All she talks about is the baby. It is exhausting. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Jasper froze. He looked at the speakers as if they had betrayed him. He looked at the crowd and saw only judgment. There was no sympathy left. He was naked before them, stripped of his charm, his lies, and his dignity. "You wanted to kick me out on the street," I said softly. "You wanted to take my child and use her trust fund to pay for your lifestyle. You wanted to erase me." I took a step forward, the diamonds at my throat flashing like ice. "But you made a miscalculation. Jasper, you forgot to check who actually owned your debt." The screen shifted again. This time, it displayed a series of complex financial documents. They were the loan agreements for Thorn Enterprises, the mortgage deeds, and the promissory notes. And stamped across every single page in bold red ink was the logo of Alethea Holdings. And below the logo, the signature of the sole proprietor, Elizabeth Larkin Sterling. "Alethea Holdings is not a group of foreign investors," I announced. "It is me. I bought your debt, Jasper. I bought your mortgage. I bought your credit lines. I own every brick of your office building. I own the chair you sit in. I own the lease on the car you drove here tonight." Jasper's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the stage to hold himself up. His face was the color of old ash. You buy it? And as the primary creditor," I continued, my voice hardening into steel, "I have reviewed the company financials. I have found evidence of massive embezzlement, money laundering, tax fraud. You have been funneling company assets into offshore accounts under Miss Vance's name." I pointed to the screen, where bank transfer records appeared, showing hundreds of thousands of dollars moving from Thorn Enterprises to Serena V. Consulting in the Caymans. "Because of this breach of contract," I declared, "I am activating the immediate repayment clause inherent in all high-risk loans. I am calling the debt. Jasper, all of it, tonight." "You can't," Jasper whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't have the cash. You know I don't have the cash." "I know," I said. "That is why I am seizing the collateral." I looked over at Elena Thorne. She was standing near the buffet table, clutching a napkin, her face frozen in a rictus of terror. "You told me you mortgaged your parents' home to the hilt to keep the company afloat," I said to Jasper, but I was looking at Elena. "You put up the family estate as security for the last bridge loan, the loan you just defaulted on." "No," Elena breathed out, her voice barely audible. "Not the house, not my house." "I am afraid so." "Elena," I said, "the foreclosure process begins tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. I suggest you start packing, although, since you were so eager to renovate my bedroom, perhaps you are good at moving furniture." Elena let out a high, keen wail. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed into the arms of a waiter, sliding to the floor in a heap of black silk and broken pride. It wasn't a fake faint this time. It was the total system failure of a woman who valued status more than oxygen. "Mother!" Jasper cried out. But he didn't move to help her. He was too busy staring at the ruin of his own life. Then, movement flared to his right. Serena Vance, who had been standing like a statue throughout the presentation, suddenly animated. The realization had hit her. The blind trust was a lie. The merger was a fantasy. Jasper wasn't a rich CEO about to get richer. He was a pauper about to go to prison. And worse, he had dragged her name through the mud, exposing her as a knowing accomplice to fraud. She turned on him. Her face, usually so composed, was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "You lied to me!" she screamed. Jasper turned toward her, his hands up in a pathetic gesture of defense. Serena, wait. I can fix this. We can… Smack. The sound of her hand connecting with his face echoed through the ballroom. It was a vicious, open-handed slap that snapped his head to the side. You broke, she shrieked, shoving him in the chest. You are broke. You told me you were worth $50 million. You told me you were buying the company back. You made me look like a fool. Serena, please, Jasper begged, clutching his stinging cheek. We are partners. Partners. She laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. I am not your partner. I am a victim. You tricked me. I didn't know anything about the fraud. I am innocent. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. Betty, you know me. I wouldn't do this if I knew he was stealing. He manipulated me too. He is a liar. I looked down at her, the woman who had worn the red dress to match him. The woman who had mocked my child. Save it for the judge, Serena, I said coldly. The transfers to your account are very clear. You spent the stolen money. You are just as guilty as he is. Serena let out a scream of frustration and shoved Jasper again, sending him stumbling back into the security guard. I hate you, she spat at him. I never loved you. You were just a ticket out of my father's shadow, and you turned out to be a fraud. She turned and tried to run toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically on the marble, but she didn't get far. The main doors of the ballroom swung open again. This time, it wasn't Arthur Sterling. It was 6 officers from the city police department, specifically the Financial Crimes Division. They were led by a detective I recognized from the files Arthur had given me. They moved with efficiency. 2 officers intercepted Serena before she could reach the lobby. She started screaming, threatening to sue them, shouting, Do you know who my father is? The other 4 officers marched straight toward the stage, straight toward Jasper. Jasper saw them coming. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed, and filled with a terrifying realization. The game was over. There were no more moves, no more lies, no more charm. Betty, he whimpered, please, I am the father of your child. No, I said, my voice quiet but amplified, so every soul in the room could hear. You are just a sperm donor. Jasper, my daughter has a father. His name is Arthur Sterling. The officers reached him. Jasper Thorne, the lead detective announced, his voice booming. You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and grand larceny. They grabbed his arms. Jasper didn't fight. He slumped, his body going boneless with defeat. They pulled his hands behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the final punctuation mark on his career. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the golden boy of the city was shackled like a common criminal. Flashbulbs erupted, blinding and relentless. The photographers were getting the shot of the decade Jasper Thorne, weeping, defeated, and broken. I watched him. I looked for the love I had once felt. I looked for the memory of our wedding day, of the way he used to smile at me. I searched my heart for even a scrap of pity, but there was nothing. The man being dragged away wasn't my husband. He was a stranger who had worn my husband's face. He was a parasite I had finally excised. As the officers began to haul him away, I spoke one last time. Officer, wait. The detective paused. Jasper looked back over his shoulder, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Did he think I would save him? Did he think I would show mercy? I leaned into the microphone. I stared straight into his soul. I have one more announcement, I said. I reached into my purse, which Arthur had placed on the podium for me. I pulled out a thick envelope. I held it up. These are divorce papers, I said, drafted by the best lawyers in the state. They grant me full custody of Clara. They grant me full ownership of all remaining marital assets, which, thanks to your bankruptcy, is essentially just your debt. I walked down the steps of the stage. The crowd parted for me. I walked right up to Jasper, who was trembling in the grip of the police. I tucked the envelope into the pocket of his torn tuxedo jacket. Consider yourself served, I whispered. I stepped back and looked him up and down. My name is Betty Larkins Sterling. I said, loud and clear. And I am unilaterally divorcing you. Goodbye, Jasper. I turned my back on him. Take him away, I commanded. The police dragged him out. He was sobbing now, incoherent pleas for forgiveness that faded as the doors closed behind him. Serena was dragged out behind him, still screaming about her innocence. Elena was being fanned by paramedics in the corner. The room was silent. I stood in the center of the ballroom, the spotlight still on me. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Arthur was there. He looked at me, his eyes shining with pride. He nodded once. "It is done," he said. I looked around at the faces of the people who had mocked me, ignored me, and judged me. They were all looking at me now with fear and respect. I smoothed my velvet dress. I touched the sapphire in my throat. "Yes," I said, "it is done." But as I looked at the closed doors, I knew it wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning. I wasn't just free. I was powerful. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I owned it. The fall of the House of Thorn did not happen with a bang, but with a whimper that echoed through the tabloids for 30 days straight. It has been exactly 1 month since the night of the gala, and the city has already chewed Jasper up and spat him out. The headlines shifted from shock to mockery within 48 hours. "Thorn in the side of justice," one paper read. "The Emperor has no clothes, only handcuffs," read another. The once gleaming reputation of Thorn Enterprises has been reduced to a cautionary tale taught in business schools under the chapter titled "How Not to Commit Fraud." The company itself has been liquidated. My team at Alethea Holdings dismantled it piece by piece. We sold the furniture, we sold the client list, and we sold the office leases. The logo that Jasper had spent $50,000 designing was scraped off the glass doors by a janitor 2 weeks ago. There is nothing left but dust. Jasper is currently residing in the Starlight Motel, a dilapidated establishment on the outskirts of the industrial district where the neon sign flickers and the sheets are questionable. He is out on bail, thanks to a bail bondsman who took his watch as collateral. But his assets are frozen, his passport is confiscated, and his trial is set for early next year. I heard from my private investigator that Jasper spends his days pacing the 10-by-10 room, frantically calling old contacts who no longer pick up. He has tried to call me 47 times in the last week alone. Every single call went straight to a voicemail box that I never checked. As for Serena Vance, the love of his life, she did not stick around for the downfall. Her father, terrified that the scandal would infect his own empire, issued a public statement disowning her 3 days after the arrest. He cut her off without a cent, the last I heard. Serena was seen boarding a budget flight to Arizona, dragging 2 suitcases and wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her face. She has gone from a socialite to a pariah, exiled to the desert to start over where no one knows she is the woman who mocked a newborn baby. But I do not spend much time thinking about them. I have an empire to run. I sit in the executive chair on the 52nd floor of the Sterling Tower. The view from here is breathtaking. The city spreads out like a map of lights, the rivers winding through the concrete canyons, the cars moving like blood through arteries. This was Arthur's chair for 40 years. Now, it is mine. The heavy oak door opens, and my assistant walks in. She is efficient, sharp, and loyal, everything Jasper's team never was. "Mrs. Sterling," she says, placing a leather folder on my desk. "The final decree just arrived from the court. The judge signed it this morning." I opened the folder. There it is, the divorce decree. It is just a piece of paper. Really, a few staples, some legal jargon, and a stamp that says, "Final." But as I run my fingers over the embossed seal, I feel a weight lifting off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The terms are absolute. I have sole legal and physical custody of Clara. Jasper has no visitation rights. Pending the outcome of his criminal trial and a psychiatric evaluation that I insisted upon, I did not ask for alimony. I did not ask for child support. Taking money from Jasper would be like squeezing blood from a stone. and frankly, I do not need his pennies. I have my own millions now. Thank you, Sarah, I say, signing the acknowledgement of receipt with a flourish. File this in the archive, and then burn the digital copy. I don't want to see his name in my system ever again. Understood, she says with a smile. Oh, and the board of directors is waiting in the conference room. Mr. Sterling is already there. I stand up, smoothing the skirt of my cream-colored suit. I catch my reflection in the glass wall. The woman looking back is unrecognizable from the Betty Larkins of a month ago. Her spine is straight. Her eyes are clear. She looks like she owns the place because she does. I walk down the corridor to the boardroom. The double doors are open. Around the long mahogany table sit 12 of the most powerful men and women in finance. They stop talking as I enter. They stand up. It is a sign of respect that Jasper would have killed for, but one I have earned. At the head of the table sits Arthur, but he is not presiding. He is sitting in a side chair, and in his arms, cooing happily at a rattle, is Clara. My daughter is wearing a tiny dress made of the softest organic cotton, no logos, no branding, just quality. She looks up as I enter and lets out a squeal of recognition. Madam Chairwoman, Arthur says, his eyes twinkling with pride as he bounces Clara on his knee. The floor is yours. I walk to the head of the table. I place my hands on the leather surface. Good morning, everyone, I say, my voice steady and commanding. Let's get started. The acquisition of the Thorn debt portfolio has yielded a 14% return on investment after liquidation. I propose we reinvest that capital into a new initiative. I press a button on the remote, and the screen behind me lights up. The Larkins Foundation, I announce, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal aid, financial literacy, and safe housing for single mothers who have been victims of financial abuse and abandonment. The board members nod. They know better than to argue with me. They have seen what happens to people who underestimate Betty Sterling. We will fund it with the profits from Jasper Thorne's ruin, I continue. It seems only poetic that his greed should pay for the salvation of women he would have despised. The meeting lasts for 2 hours. I make decisions on asset allocation. I approve marketing budgets, and I fire a vendor who tried to overcharge us. I am decisive. I am fair. And I am entirely in control. When the meeting adjourns, Arthur walks over to me, handing Clara into my arms. She smells of milk and lavender. She feels solid and real. The anchor of my life. You were magnificent, Arthur says softly. Your father would have been so proud. You didn't just survive the fire. Elizabeth, you became the flame. I had a good teacher, I replied, kissing his cheek. I have one more gift for you, Arthur says, pulling a document from his pocket. The name change petition. The judge approved it along with the divorce. I look at the paper. Clara Elizabeth Sterling. No more Thorn. The stain has been washed away. She is Sterling now. She is part of a legacy of strength, not a legacy of lies. Thank you, Papa, I whisper, the words slipping out naturally. He has been more of a father to me in 1 month than my own father was able to be, and certainly more than Jasper ever was. Go, Arthur says, gesturing to the private elevator. Take the afternoon off. Go to the gardens. Enjoy the sunshine. You have earned it. I take his advice. Half an hour later, I am walking through the private gardens of the Sterling estate. It is a sanctuary of high hedges, blooming roses, and the sound of water trickling from stone fountains. The city noise is just a distant hum here. I am holding Clara, pointing out a butterfly that is fluttering near a hydrangea bush. Look, Clara, I coo. Pretty butterfly. It is free, she giggles, reaching out her chubby hand. My phone buzzes in the pocket of my cardigan. I ignored it at first. But it buzzes again, and again. I shift Clara to my hip and pull the phone out. It is a text message from an unknown number. I unlock the screen. Unknown number. Betty, please, it is Jasper. I borrowed this phone from the motel clerk. I know I messed up. I know I deserve this. But please, I am begging you. I need to see her. Just one photo. Just let me see my daughter. I am so lonely. Betty, I have nothing. I am sorry. Please. I stare at the words. A month ago. This text would have broken me. I would have felt a pang of guilt. I would have remembered the good times. I would have wondered if I was being too harsh. But today I look at the text, and I feel nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity. It is just words on a screen from a man who chose a yacht over his child. He isn't sorry he hurt us. He is sorry he lost. He is sorry he is in a motel instead of a mansion. I look at Clara. She is busy trying to eat her own fist, completely unbothered by the existence of Jasper Thorne. She doesn't know him. She never will, and that is the greatest gift I can give her. Goodbye, Jasper, I say to the wind. I do not reply. I do not block the number. That would require effort. Instead, I press delete. Then, I look at the phone itself. It is the device that held the evidence. It is the device that holds the pain. I walk over to the large marble fountain in the center of the garden. The water is crystal clear, bubbling merrily over a statue of a cherub. I lift my hand. With a flick of my wrist, I toss the phone into the water. Splash! It sinks to the bottom, bubbling for a second before going dark forever among the copper pennies of wishes made by strangers. I take a deep breath. The air smells of jasmine and wet earth. It smells of the future. I turn away from the fountain and lift Clara high into the air. She shrieks with delight, kicking her legs. "We are rich, baby," I tell her, spinning around until the sky blurs above us. But not because of the money. We are rich because we are free, we are happy, and we are untouchable. I walk back toward the mansion, my heels clicking on the stone path, leaving the sunken phone and the sunken man behind me in the water. The revenge is over. Life has just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment down below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed watching Betty take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Scarlet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button, and give the video a hype to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.